facing betrayal from her former mate Aowen and the loss of control over her wolf spirit. How will Aowen uphold her position as Luna of the Moon River Pack? And when Kylie appears, challenging for the position of Luna, can Aowen successfully defend her honor? The Battle of the Pack is imminent. Subscribe to join us on the battlefield. Chapter 35 Penance. Before the challenge was administered, you mentioned Alpha Aowen had reached out to Alpha Frederick for a possible cooperation. Did anything become of that now? They corresponded for a while, but once the challenge was made public, Alpha Frederick retracted any possibility of the Night Ridge Pack assisting the Silver Arrow Pack. When Caden had finished relating his story to Alpha Andon and Luna Aowen, a period of silence passed on through the hospital room, save for the quiet beeping of the ex-Beta's heart monitor. I'm inclined to believe you. Alpha Andon spoke first, enunciating himself slowly as his brain processed the information. But I'm sure you know that as the former Beta of the Silver Arrow Pack, we don't know how trustworthy you are. Caden bowed his head, shame filling his face. I understand. Things happened so quickly, and I failed to take action earlier when everything was already going wrong. But I now know that however Aowen and Bradley will go about this, they will do whatever they can to gain an advantage or sway the challenge in their favor. Are you prepared to face whichever Alpha will meet you in the fight? Amanda turned and exchanged a look with Aowen, who was gazing back at him with concern in her eyes. The Alpha's heart's often towards his mate. She'd had to go through so much and she'd only been the Luna for a few months. All because of her former mate and his father. If Caden was telling the truth and Bradley really had killed both Delta Jace and Gamma Edric, then Landon could expect the man to be out for blood if he were to come up against him in the challenge. Coupled with the possibility he'd had an affair while Lunatis had still been alive before ejecting his mistress, while she was pregnant with twins off of Pack territory, Bradley had turned to a much more darker path than Landon had ever thought. And by having given the order to his subordinates that led to their demise, it made Aowen at least an accessory and at worst partner in regards to his father. Landon couldn't help feeling somewhat disappointed in the other Alpha. He would have thought Aowen would know better than this. Landon briefly weighed his options. He could delay the challenge like Caden had warned him to, but he could only hold off on it for so long, and he knew what else Aowen and Bradley would resort to. With the small numbers that their pack had dwindled to, it made sense that they would resort to more desperate methods. I think that the challenge shall go ahead, he decided aloud, causing Caden and Aowen to stare at him in disbelief. Landon, Aowen said, unable to hide the nervousness in her voice. The Alpha gently took his mate's hands in his, fixating his soft gaze on hers. This may be the best option we have in dealing with what is left of the Silver Arrow Pack. They may not wish to fight fair, but we will, because we have something actually worth fighting for. Determination flashed in Landon's blue eyes as he cut Aowen's face. It won't be me that just becomes the strongest Alpha in the Evergreen Wilds, but, as my mate, you will become the strongest Luna. We could change the packs here for the better in so many ways, and I know that it all rides on this challenge. He kissed Aowen's forehead. I've trained for weeks after sending that challenge to Alpha Aowen, and I'm slightly more familiar with Alpha Bradley's style in battle. He seeks to bleed his opponents out, and if I can block him from attacking those parts of my wolf, I can wear him down. That makes sense. It matches how I've seen Alpha Bradley fight before. Aowen agreed. She hadn't sparred with Bradley at all, but she'd seen the way he trained the pack warriors. I can help you with that once I have recovered, Caden spoke up. It is the least I can do for all that has happened. Alpha and Anna turned and studied the former Beta for a heartbeat. Any help would be appreciated. If you report anything to the Silver Arrow Pack. However, I swear that I won't, Caden said firmly, sitting up straight in the bed. If I betray you, you are free to cut me out of the pack, or have me killed. Landon raised an eyebrow at this and only gave a nod. Rest well for now. Thank you for informing us of this, Mr. Anderson. Alpha Andon and Luna Aowen stepped out of the room, with Dr. Enzo waiting for them outside. I'll observe him for a few more days. His human self has recuperated quickly, but his wolf will need some time to fully regain his strength. Thank you, Dr. Enzo. If anything happens, tell us. Luna Aowen smiled gratefully at him before they both left the clinic together. You're sure about going ahead with the challenge after what Caden told us? She asked Landon. Yes, but I just found you, Aowen whispered, her irises unable to hide the fear that finally bled onto her face. Landon's heart cracked as he felt Aowen's anxiety, Locke whining protectively. He knew Aowen had been trying to keep up strong appearances since they confirmed the challenge, but with the added worry from him facing Alpha Bradley, who had just killed two of the strongest warriors she'd known from the Silver Arrow Pack, she couldn't hold her own concerns much longer. And I'll still be here, Landon assured her, gazing deeply into her eyes. I meant what I said. I want to start a family with you one day, when this is all over. He pulled her into a tight embrace. Even though I won't be able to accompany you to the challenge grounds, I'll be there in spirit to cheer you on. Aowen whispered to him, making warmth well up within him. And I trust that while Beta and Ija are away, you'll watch over the rest of the pack. To my agent extraordinaire, Position丨Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She nodded, knowing Landon was speaking to her like this in a way to assure her that he would return to her side. I'm already blessed that the moon goddess allowed you to form a new mate bond with me. The Elsa murmured, his head on hers. I won't waste our second chance. Inhaling her mate's scent, Aowen relaxed, a jittery purring wistfully within. Mr. Anderson. Several hours later in the evening, Dr. Enzo knocked his head into Caden's hospital room, who had been napping since Landon and Aowen had left to help his wolf recover his strength. Awoken, sat up. You have visitors. A small flicker of hope rose within the man, but he quickly crushed it. Send them in. He expected it to be either Landon or Aowen again, asking some more details to test the credibility of his tale, only to be greeted by a few faces he hadn't seen in a while. Dad Banal Beta Stella said, being the first to step into the room. Following her was Kale, looking far more put together than he ever had been in the Silver Arrow, and to my agent extraordinaire, Position丨Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. His mate looked as radiant as ever, her dark hair tied into a windswept bun and a pastel floral dress that she appeared to have bought at the Moon River Pack. Her expression was unreadable, though Corson howled with longing when her sweet scent reached him. Beta Stella, Kale, to my agent extraordinaire, Position丨Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Caden said, his eyes passing over each member of his family with surprise. The three came to stand by his bedside, but stayed out of his reach by an arm's length, which was understandable. I didn't think any of you would want to see me, Caden said quietly. Stella's gaze briefly met his before dropping to the floor. I considered not doing so. But after having a conversation with Luna Aowen and then my brother and mother, we decided to come here together. Caden's eyes flickered over to his son, who looked at the ground as well, before gazing up at his wife. To my agent extraordinaire, Position丨Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You're here, he breathed softly. I am. The woman replied, making no move to approach him. Corson was still whining for his mate, and Caden could see Sylvie's eyes change briefly to Soren's, but she kept her wolf away. The former Beta listened to the silence from the three of them before he inhaled. He had a lot he had to say after all. I'm sorry for not standing up for any of you, for Aowen. I let my former friendship with Elfa Bradley and comfort with my life as the bait of the Silver Arrow pact blind me to what was right. I should have told him that covering for what his son did was wrong, and that he shouldn't have exiled Aowen for something that wasn't her fault. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, Stella said, crossing her arms. Caden pressed on, knowing that wouldn't suffice. He addressed his daughter first. I should have left the Silver Arrow pack sooner and maybe come look for you all. Instead of needing the function to find out what had happened, I was a coward. You gave me another chance to take the leap and do something right for once, and I couldn't take it until it was too late. I haven't been in the mover pack for long since your appointment, but I already know that I'm as capable of a beta as you are. He turned to Sylvie. You were right all along. Aowen became part of our family after her own parents died, and I should have looked out for her. I'm relieved and happy to see her with everything she deserves, but it was no thanks to me. What Aaron and Bradley did was no example of loyalty, and neither was what I did when I hid the truth from you. Saving the biggest apology for last, he looked at his son. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. After you departed, you left behind a lot of your notes and programming materials. He began. With an empty house, and nothing to do but drink, eat and reflect on his actions, Caden had ventured into the basement and some point and found himself face to face with the intricate computer system his son had left. Minus any indication on how to make them work, since Cale couldn't give away all his expertise after the email leaking incident. The work you do, both from the Silver Arrow pack and for the Moon River pack, is unlike anything I've ever seen. You were able to help uncover and broadcast the truth of Aaron and Kylie's affair to everyone in the pack, and didn't even back down when Bradley threatened you. I may not understand what you love to do, but it was no excuse for me to overlook you. You may not be the best warrior or have the strongest wolf, but I shouldn't have put all my expectations on your physical strength. I see now that you are just as capable as anyone else regardless. He had the most distant relationship with Cale out of everyone here, and he saw the expression on the man's face. He hadn't expected to ever hear his father say that to him. If you all don't want to do anything with me ever again, then I understand. Caden went on quietly. But given everything that has gone down, I thought it would be better to say all of this now, while I still have the opportunity. And if you do decide to give me another chance, I'll do all I can to earn back your trust. The three of them looked at him, some parts pity, some parts wistfulness, some parts hesitation. They exchanged glances, mind linking for what seemed like an eternity before Sylvie took a tentative step forward. We heard that. You pushed both yourself and your wolf to the very brink to escape Bradley and arrive here to warn the Moon River pack. It doesn't make up for everything that has happened, but I suppose for the moment, we can forgive you. But that doesn't mean that we were complete family again, Cale added, crossing his arms. You still have a long way to go to truly mend your relationship with us. Caden responded to all this with toned-down relief. I understand. Thank you all for this. I promise I won't let you down this time. The former beta half expected the three of them to bid him good night and leave after this, but instead, they stepped aside. We might as well formally introduce you to our mates, Stella said, allowing the two figures to enter the room. She gently grasped Elijah's shoulder as he came in and dipped his head. They'd seen each other during the function and had interacted as fellow betas briefly in the year before, but this was the first time Elijah would be formally introduced to Caden as his daughter's mate. Dad, this my mate, Beta Elijah. Caden managed a tired smile despite his state and returned Elijah's nod. It hadn't gone past him at the function that Elijah and Stella now had marks on their necks. They matched each other perfectly, right down to the accents in their clothes. The moon goddess had blessed his daughter indeed. And Dad, this is my mate. Kale spoke, gently taking Josh's hand and guiding them both forward. Damn it, Joshua. Everyone in the clinic room seemed to hold their breath as Joshua bowed his head to a visibly surprised Caden. Mr. Anderson, damn it, Josh. You're my son's mate. Caden's expression was clearly one bursting with questions as he looked at Kale, who pushed up his glasses and steeled his face before nodding. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Josh raised his head, and the couple tensed a little as the former beta studied them both. And then Caden smiled as well and bowed his head to the gamma. Damn it, Josh. It is a pleasure to officially be introduced to you. I hope you and my son are happy together. The others silently released a collective sigh of relief for now, seeing Joshua and Kale's faces relax as Caden asked the couple a few questions on how they had met. Sylvie stayed put near the doorway, with Sora purring happily as she inhaled what she could of Caden and Corson's scent. Baby steps, Sylvie reminded her wolf, gazing quietly at her husband. Despite it being late, after the revelation that Caden had brought to the pack, Aowen had headed straight to her usual area at the gym to carry out her training. She didn't necessarily need Delta Cassidy's guidance now, but as she punched and kicked the dummy in front of her, her mind was elsewhere. Before she talked to the moon goddess, the conversation had given her confidence that she had ended up rightfully where she was supposed to be. She had gained a new pack and a new mate, and became their Luna. But now, hearing Bradley had made use of a loophole to take his son's place in fighting Alpha and unnerved her despite Landon's reassurances. She recalled the moon goddess's wording. One way or another you were perhaps just always meant to be the Luna of the strongest pack in the Evergreen Wilds. She had mentioned Aowen still being the Luna, but not the pack she was in charge of. Aowen had faith in her mate, she truly did, but there was still a small, nagging part of her brain that kept reminding her of the worst-case scenario. Opal pushed her thoughts out of her head. She'd been in her honeymoon phase since Landon and Aowen had marked one another, but now she was here to snap her human back to the present. The moon goddess also said for you not to worry. Landon will come home to us. I hope so. Aowen sighed and wiped the sweat from her forehead with a towel. She was about to get up and go for another round of practice when a soft voice greeted her from behind. Good evening, Luna Aowen. The Luna stopped and turned to see Jessie and Elise approaching her, both dressed in gym clothes. Oh, good evening, Elise. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Elise had recuperated pretty well after the Wolfsbane incident, but she had never come to this level of the gym before this. Up until recently, she'd only exercised to remain fit, but never trained to fight. Aowen was even more taken aback to see a group of other young women trailing behind the two. They were all lone gazer, judging from the sweet scents. Why are you all here? The group exchanged glances before Elise spoke meekly. We were hoping you would train us. Aowen raised an eyebrow in surprise. We heard from Delta Cassidy on how you picked up her fighting tactics so quickly after coming here. One of the young gazer behind explained. We usually don't train ourselves in combat. With the challenge coming up and the possibility of the Moon River Pack taking over the position of the Silver Arrow Pack, we decided to improve our fighting skills. And if our Luna can do it, why not us? I finally decided that I want to be able to learn how to fight. Elise piped up softly. My parents always told me I was too fragile, too gentle, and that I didn't need to learn how to push back enemies in combat. And you remember how Ongazer were treated back in the Silver Arrow Pack? Jessie said, sharing a look with the Luna. Despite her initial surprise, Aowen stepped back from the dummy and gestured with head to the others. I still wouldn't consider myself the most proficient fighter, but I'll try my best to teach all of you what I know." As the first of many training sessions began, the Luna wondered why a part of her was feeling rather emotional. The dingy town was on the very fringe of the evergreen wilds. It had been abandoned by its human occupants decades ago after a fire, and was now occupied by rogues. Rogues didn't take kindly to strangers trespassing on their territory, especially pack members. So when an unfamiliar woman with amber eyes entered their midst, a collective growl went through the area. Those that had been designated as guards shifted to attack her, only to be matched evenly in less than a few seconds as she shifted to, inflicting scratches, bite marks and painful-looking wounds on some of them that caused a few to whimper and retreat. More wolves joined in the brief scuffle before a howl silenced all of them. The town's designated leader stalked towards her, holding up his hand. "Everyone stand down." As the woman shifted back, he tossed a piece of sackcloth to cover herself for now. Even though he was a rogue, the aura he emanated was impressively close to that of an alpha. His eyes stared impassively at the intruder. She was admittedly beautiful, with a wonderfully refreshing green apple scent, but he had seen this face before. "I recognize you. You were the Luna of the Silver Arrow Pack," he said suspiciously, as more threatening snarls arose from the onlookers. "You have no business being here. I was the Luna." The woman spat, looking up, and her eyes briefly flashed into her wolf's as her face twisted into anger and bitterness. "My mate cast me aside for another woman," the man standing over her scoffed. "As if we haven't heard that before. Give me a good reason why I shouldn't have you thrown out or killed." The woman smirked at him confidently. "Firstly, I was once one of the Silver Arrow Pack's strongest warriors and could probably take on your pack and survive." More disdainful growls from the surrounding rogues as their leader held up his hand to pause them. "And secondly, I'm prepared to make a deal." The man narrowed his eyes. "What deal?" "I'm sure rogues have their own way of following the official pack networks, and so you know that the Silver Arrow Pack is doomed to fail." The she-wolf spoke, staring up at him with a calculating smile. "So I'm prepared to work together with you. Help me kill Alfil Andon and Luna Aowen, and we will take over the moon of the pack." Chapter 36 Wound. The challenge was to take place in a stretch of neutral ground situated directly in the heart of the evergreen wilds. Accompanied only by Beta Elijah, Landon prepared to depart once the morning hit. Before he left, he embraced both his parents, who hugged him back tightly with tears in their eyes. "Be careful." Wendell spoke to his son, patting his shoulder before Holly gently touched Landon's cheeks with a hopeful but nevertheless worried smile. Jasper and Nicole were similarly hugging Beta Elijah goodbye, with Beta Stella kissing him on the cheek and promising to help Luna and the others look out for the Moon River Pack while he was gone. Finally, standing at the main gates of Pack territory, Alfil Andon bid farewell to his mate as the other Pack members looked on with trepidation for what was to come. "I'll be back before you know it," Landon murmured into her ear, gently kissing the top of her head. Aowen felt him inhale softly, probably taking in her scent one more time before he left. She did the same, and briefly her mind took her back to the very first night they met. Alfil Andon, with his dirty blonde hair and blue eyes, seemingly put together but with that hint of melancholy behind his gaze. She owed so much to him. "I love you, Aowen," Landon rumbled, his eyes changing to larks for a second. In return, Aowen felt opal purr as their mate ran a hand through her soft brown hair. Aowen wanted to say it back immediately, return the emotions that she indeed reciprocated, but instead she held it in. She separated from Alfil and slowly and cupped his cheek. "Come home to me, and I'll say it back," she whispered, her face filled with resolve. Landon's face grew solemn, and he gave her a decisive nod before he and Beta Elijah waved to the others and got into the car. As the vehicle drove away and slowly shrunk off to a dot on the forest scenery, Luna Aowen remained there for the longest time, Opal already howling with worry and longing. They would be okay, right? Caden had quickly thanked to his wolf, and had sparred and trained with Elfo and the best he could do before the latter had gone. Him and his family were still on rather awkward speaking terms, but to be fair, they had every right to it after all that had transpired. He was around Sylvie the most, but this was more for the benefit of Corson and Soren, who had been apart for far too long and were overjoyed to be reunited again. After Alfo and Beta Elijah left, Luna Aowen took over most pack duties, with her subordinates, along with Delta Cassidy and Gamma Josh supporting her. Everyone had their own segments to focus on. Beta Stella worked most closely with Luna Aowen to overlook the movements of daily patrols, settle disputes and other concerns from pack members, and check on the development of programs and facilities around. Delta Cassidy and Delta Lincoln were both training the pack warriors, preparing them in case the Moon River pack was set upon while the Alpha and his Beta were away. And with the addition of warriors from the Silver Arrow pack, they needed to adjust and work together with their new pack mates. While they weren't warriors, Aowen continued to train the segment of Gazer that had come to her the week before. Gamma Josh worked with Kale to ensure the effectiveness of the new security measures for the Moon River pack, as well as heading the daily patrols himself. Josh was also helping with the installation of a monitoring room in the underground shelters beneath pack grounds, which would allow his mate to still have eyes and ears around pack territory despite not being physically there. Gamma Marissa was working together with Dr. Enzo on a secret project that Alpha Landin and Lu Wen had assigned to them both. With the dirty tactics that some of their enemies were employing these days, they needed to test a failsafe. Throughout all this, Aowen knew that her mate was still on his way to the site where he would face the Alpha of the once great Silver Arrow pack, whoever it was. And as she went to bed with Landon's scent still faintly on the sheets and pillows, all she could do was pray to the moon goddess that he would be all right. As Luna Aowen was finishing up one night, a soft knock resonated from her office door. "Come in." Shutting down her computer, to her curiosity, it was Caden who stepped into the room. "Luna Aowen," he bowed in respect, and she stood up and acknowledged him with a dip of her head. "Mr. Anderson, what can I do for you? I know that I am no longer Beta, and neither am I an official member of the Moon River Pack yet, but I hope that I can be allowed to accompany the pack warriors in training and patrols." Caden spoke. Luna Aowen considered this briefly before nodding. "I shall consider it, perhaps with supervision and..." Caden hesitated, waiting for Aowen to look back up to him again before going on. "I'd like to formally apologize to you as well, for everything that happened at the Silver Arrow pack." Aowen nodded, acknowledging this with a calm smile. "Thank you, but I've come to terms with my initial exile by now. It may have hurt me at first, but without it I may never have come to the Moon River Pack or met Helpful Endin again. I am only relieved and thankful that you risked your life to come here and warn us of Aaron and Bradley's plan." She paused. "Have you heard anything of who replaced you in the Silver Arrow Pack? The Beta is supposed to go with the Alpha to the challenge site." Caden frowned as he thought things over, before shaking his head no. "The Silver Arrow Pack has not made any official announcement since the function, not even the deaths of Jace and Edric. But given the transference of the Alpha title requires approval from the Beta as well, I can only guess it would be someone who would not dare to disagree with the Alpha." "And what of Aaron?" "The last I remember is that while Bradley would go to fight Helpful Andin, that Aaron was to stay behind in the Silver Arrow Pack and select a Luna." A moment of silence passed before Aowen sighed heavily and got up. She felt almost pity for her former mate, considering the state that his pack was now in. Hopefully the next Luna is someone more restrained than Kylie. He should have learnt his lesson by now in that regard. She bade Caden goodnight before they both left her office. Arriving at the plains where the challenge was to take place, Alpha Andon and Beta Elijah both dismounted the car, heading towards the main site. Lark growled in Landon's mind as they both recognized the visibly older man already waiting for them, with a shorter, fearful-looking young man that could only be his replacement for Beta Caden. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Dispatched by the royal family as a neutral party to oversee the challenge, stood by Alpha Bradley, Landon acknowledged, stopping opposite him, Alpha Andon. The lack of surprise on Landon's behalf didn't seem to faze the now reinstated leader of the Silver Arrow Pack. Despite having been retired for a few months, his physique hadn't deteriorated by much. He had brutally killed his Delta and Gamma after all. I have brought Beta Elijah as my second in command, and witness to this challenge. Landon spoke, as Elijah gave a swift nod behind him. And I have brought Beta Richard as my second in command and witness. Richard meekly nodded, a step away from practically shuddering in his boots land, and almost felt sorry for him, given the abrupt and frankly intimidating circumstances that surrounded his appointment. After checking both of them thoroughly, it was determined that neither of them were carrying illegal items physically, or had substances in their system that would give them an advantage over the other. The doctor cleared his throat. Before we begin, I shall repeat the rules one more time as a reminder. Looking back and forth between the two alphas as they circled each other. The challenge will begin exactly when I say commence. Both alphas are required to stay within the boundaries of this area and not use the forest or trees to their advantage. The challenge will end with either a surrender or death, after which the victor will inherit the title of the strongest alpha, and receive the right for their pack to be declared the representative of the Evergreen Wilds in any official capacity henceforth. Any breaking of these rules will result in disqualification and forfeiture of the challenge. Do you both consent to these rules? I, Alpha Bradley Young of the Silver Arrow Pack, consent to these rules. Bradley spoke, his voice resonating through the clearing. I, Alpha and Uncartwright of the Moon River Pack, consent to these rules. Landon said as well, watching the other man closely. Very well. The doctor nodded. With both betas watching a safe distance away, he spoke again. You may both shift. Landon and Bradley headed a distance away to undress and shift into their wolves. As Locke took over his human's body, his sandy brown fur sprouted up, he caught a glimpse of Bastion. The deep grey wolf was slightly bigger than Locke with a few grey hairs here and there, but he looked no less fierce than Bradley. Locke stepped back into the clearing, both wolves stalking and circling each other as they prepared for the doctor to give the word. Bastion bared his teeth in a threatening snarl, his deep red eyes glaring into Locke's very soul. He's trying to intimidate us. Landon spoke to his wolf. Don't back down. Locke returned the snarl, his yellow eyes glaring back at Bastion's. The others gazed dark and further when it became clear that there was no backing away from this challenge now. Commence. Immediately, Bastion made the first move and lunged for the sandy wolf. At the same time, voices flooded the Moon River Pack mind, Inc., most prominently from Kale. Luna Aowen, there are rogues closing in on the pack. They've appearing on every single camera stationed near each entrance. Tending to her garden outside her home, Luna Aowen felt her heart thud more quickly as Opal already sensed the faint cloud of scents approaching. This wasn't a small band of rogues, this was an army. She'd anticipated something to occur while Alpha Andon was away, but not a rogue attack until this scale. She got up, preparing a glass of water and downing a small vial with it. Gamma Josh, Gamma Marissa, evacuate all vulnerable individuals and children to the underground shelter. Kale, go with them and monitor activity from there. Beta Stella, come to the main entrance and bring your father with you. Delta Cassidy and Delta Lincoln, protect the north and south entrances. All pack warriors, stay at your posts and do whatever you can to prevent the rogues from infiltrating the pack. Yes, Luna. All the voices chorused, shortly before all pack activity began to intensify like rapid-fire clockwork. Luna Aowen headed to the main entrance, where the existing warriors were already stationed. Sure enough, wolves with ragged, torn and dirt-matted fur were approaching the pack like a sea, closing in on the pack territory. Luna Aowen, you are the most important figure here. Beta Stella glanced at her with concern. Are you sure you shouldn't be in the shelter? Yes. I've trained for months, and I am more than confident that I know how to protect my pack. Very well. Stella nodded at her. If the rogues were all in wolf form, there was no chance of reasoning or negotiating with them. Aowen guessed that they could be remnants of Keith's followers from Priscilla's story, but why they were suddenly showing themselves after so long would have to wait. Situating herself at the head of her warriors, Luna Aowen shifted first. Before Stella, Caden and the rest of the warriors did as well. Opal's eyes scanned the approaching rogues, multiple sets of eyes filled with rage and blood, thirst. There was no clear leader amongst them, which was strange. Perhaps the leader would not make themselves known. Aowen suggested in their mind. Given Priscilla told us Keith was killed during the last rogue attacks. Flanking her, Star and Corson both growled protectively, baring their teeth at the intruders. After a tense silence, the moment was broken as one of the rogues lunged at Opal, only to be met by a mass of black as Star tackled him to the ground. The catalyst set off the rest of the wolves, who all surged forward and killed a mass of fur and snapping jaws. Star emitted a particularly commanding howl, impressive for a beta. Take out any rogue who tries to get into the Moon River pack. Rolling out of the way as her opponent attempted to claw open her belly, Star quickly latched onto and ripped out the wolf's throat. She had no time to feel any disgust or guilt at taking a life before pouncing onto the next rogue. Somewhere a distance away, Corson was doing the same, sinking his claws into a rogue's flank until blood pooled from the wound. He only stopped when he felt the rogue's grip on his fur loosen and slip away. Damn it, Josh. Once all pack members had been evacuated, head to the east gate and help to hold off the rogues there. Aowen linked. Yes, Luna. Opal herself was using her smaller size compared to some of the wolves to her advantage, easily weaving in and out of the sea of fighting creatures, assisting some of her warriors in disarming and taking down their opponent and tricking some rogues into accidentally attacking their own, via the evasive maneuvers that Delta Cassidy had taught her. One particularly large wolf attempted to go for her throat, with Opal zipping out of the way such that his jaws accidentally tore into another rogue's, the other howling in pain. The adrenaline was pumping through her veins, with Aowen, despite not being in control, helping her wolf remain alert to all surroundings and making split-second decisions. As she dug her claws into another wolf's flank, Opal howled as well, the sound carrying to the sky. We do not stop until the Moon River pack is safe. Those in the underground shelter huddled together, some of the children crying at the cacophony of fighting echoing faintly from above. Gamma Marissa in particular was embracing some of the children and trying her best to calm them down. Some of the other Omgazer, including Elise and Jessie, heading around to soothe the worries of some of the pack members. In his monitoring room, Hale's eyes flickered through the many cameras he had installed. There was fighting in so many of them, but fortunately for now, it seemed that the rogues were contained at the borders of pack territory, with no wolf having managed to infiltrate the pack itself yet. Hale's heart thumped in his chest as he recognized his friends and loved ones on the screens. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Opal and Corson disappeared and reappeared out of the cameras as they fought at the main entrance, With Cassidy's wolf Cerise and Lincoln's will flee out to wrestling with their own opponents with the other pack warriors at the north and south entrances. His heart especially T-winged with worry as he recognized Josh's wolf Janus pushing a rogue off himself before lunging back onto them. His jaw tightened as Janus sunk his teeth into their neck and tossed them side. Kale could not lose his mate today. Movement on one of the cameras near the main entrance caught Kale's eye. A dark shape that appeared to have arrived at a different time than the rest of the rogues was slowly stalking towards the mass fighting with gleaming eyes. Instead of attacking the nearest pack warrior, however, he seemed fixated on one particular wolf locked in a struggle with her opponent. Kale's eyes widened in recognition, and he hurriedly sent out a mind link. Luna Aowen, to your left. Above ground, Opal had just about registered Kale's warning when the rogue who was attempting to pin her was suddenly knocked off her. The culprit then grabbed her by the scruff of her neck and dragged the silvery grey wolf away from the fighting with shocking speed. Opal howled and struggled, but any pack member who tried to come to her aid was either preoccupied or held off by other rogue wolves. A good distance away, she could see both Star and Corson trying to reach her. A particular scent she hadn't expected today flooded Opal's nose as she was dragged to the edge of the river bordering the pack, after which Opal tore free of the wolf's grasp and spun around to face him. It was ours. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But something was off. The larger wolf was stalking towards Opal slowly, his teeth bared. Rather than their usual orange, were Aaron's green, and as they trained on Opal the wolf looked crazed. Opal stood her ground in ready to fighting stance, but beneath all that Owen's heart was pounding. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Opal growled, staring at her former mate in his wolf's body with horror. What have you done? Chapter 37 Challenge. Bastion growled lowly and lunged at Lark, claws aiming for the latter's throat. Raising himself on his back legs, Lark blocked and pushed him off, before both wolves tumbled onto the grass in a flurry. Lark ducked down and immediately dug his teeth into Bastion's fur, drawing blood as the other alpha roared in pain and shook him off with much effort. The sand-colored wolf stumbled back, seeing a gash open up on Bastion's side, the blood trickling onto the ground. Bastion drew back his lips in an angry snarl, the gash nevertheless gradually beginning to heal thanks to his alpha blood. He pounced at Lark again, who swerved out of the way and went for Bastion's throat this time. He hissed as his opponent's claws fastened into his back, but suppressed the pain as he fastened his jaws deeper. Lark tried hard to get a good grip, but Bastion was heavier than him. Using his weight, the grey wolf instead sank his claws in deeper and shoved Lark off him, pinning the sandy shape down. Lark struggled, clenching his jaws as another bolt of pain shot through him, Bastion having ripped the fur from a section of his flank. The grey wolf leaned down, his eyes shifting to Bradley's for a heartbeat. Landon could see what he was thinking. Pathetic. I expected more from you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Keep going. Landon urged his wolf, channeling both their strength into their lower body. We have to win this. Lark's golden eyes flared before he fastened his claws into Bastion's legs, trying his best to struggle free from the other's hold. Hello. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilbert, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To Opal and Olwen's disbelief, ours shifted back into Aaron, who gazed at the silvery grey wolf with disturbing, intense reverence. He took a step forward, and Opal took a few steps back, the blood pounding in her ears. You must be wondering why I'm not in the Silver Arrow pack. Aaron spoke, his eyes fixated on Opal's blue ones. As you heard, I banished Kylie after what she did at the function. You didn't deserve that. He took another step towards Opal, his expression not exactly menacing but no less unsettling. My father is fighting with Alful and right now. He told me to find a capable Luna from what remains of the Silver Arrow pack, but I figured. He knelt down in front of Opal, reaching out to stroke the wolf's fur. Why would I need to pick out a new Luna, when the perfect one was in front of me all along? When they were still mates, Opal loved Aaron's touch. But now, it sent a chill through both her and Aowen. They could sense his intentions. The wolf growled and snapped at him, causing the man to draw his hand back. The Moon River pack seems to be experiencing some difficulties. Aaron spoke gently, nodding to the clusters of fighting wolves. You don't have to be here for them. Come back with me to the Silver Arrow pack and take your rightful place as my Luna, Aowen. She is not doing shit with you. Stella burst out from the trees in all her fury, shifting back into Star and attacking Aaron. Though initially taken by surprise, Aaron growled and changed back into his wolf form, struggling with Star before managing to throw her aside. The black-furred wolf was tossed against a tree trunk and collapsed onto the ground in pain, injuries from her earlier fight still trying to heal. Corson had torn across the forest for the moment he saw Star pounce at Aaron, and now the sight of her fighting to stand up and wincing slightly made his blood boil with anger. He went straight for his former alpha, both wolves slinging into the river nearby. They thrashed around in the water righting herself. Star tried to rush to her father's aid, but was dragged back into the main fray by another rogue. Eventually, Aaron in Oz's body managed to pin Corson down in the water by his throat, threatening to drown the wolf. Corson let out a few howls as he fought to keep his snout above water, Aaron snapping his jaws and holding him in place. Upon witnessing this, Opal made a mad dash for the river, using her momentum to fasten her jaws in Oz's body and pull him off his former beta. Oz pulled back with a shocked yelp, staring at Opal with a desperate expression before he shifted back into Aaron. Aowen, I know you're in there, he pleaded with her. I fucked up by cheating on you with Kylie and having you kicked out of the Silver Arrow pack. I won't go back until you return with me. Having changed back as well, was gasping for breath behind them both, and even he was climbing out of the river with the most incredulous look on his face upon hearing what Aaron had said. Opal briefly allowed Aowen to take over, heading behind the nearest tree to fasten a cloak over her body. She nodded to Caden, who hesitated briefly before shifting back into Corson, following her silent order and heading back into the main fight. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing and patient enthusiasm. Aowen spoke, seeing how Aaron's eyes lit up at the sight of her human form. What did you do to ours? We disagreed. He wanted me to choose someone else other than you, so I persuaded my father into letting me handle another substance, one he had reserved only as a last resort. Aaron spoke, stalking towards Aowen. The wild and desperate look in his eyes made her step back once more. It gives me control over Oz's body, including enhanced speed and strength. The temporary ex-alpha had the gall to chuckle, perhaps in an attempt to soothe Luna Aowen, but unsuccessfully so. My father is still convinced an Omega won't make a good Luna. But you've proven him wrong, haven't you? To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Do you even hear yourself? Aowen asked him in disbelief. Even putting aside the fact that you silenced your wolf to such an extent, you came all the way here to ask me to come back to you. I told you, I am the Luna of the Moon River pack now, and Alful Andon's mate. I no longer have a place in the Silver Arrow pack. Aaron's green eyes flashed. Don't say that. He insisted, almost pleading. You were my fated mate before all this happened. The Silver Arrow Pack was where you grew up, and it needs you, not me. Aowen shook her head. It needs another Luna. I don't want another Luna. I want you, Aowen. Aaron growled possessive lie, moving closer to her. Come home with me. He reached for her, only for Aowen to sigh as she drew back. She knew that the both of them were not evenly matched, especially with whatever it was that Aaron had consumed. But she knew to stay true to her convictions. I am home. Neither of them were heading for a surrender. Ulfil and could not allow himself to give up this chance, no matter how much Locke's muscles screamed with exhaustion and how much fresh wounds were opening in his wolf's fur, faster than they could close up. Alpha Bradley was still no less ruthless in his attacks, though Locke had by now inflicted his fair share of injuries on Bastion as well. Part of Bastion's left ear had been ripped off, his grey-furred arc and stained with both his and Locke's blood. It had been easier for Locke to block off Bastion's fatal attacks at the beginning, but slowly but surely the sand-coloured wolf was being worn down by his larger opponent. Bastion's teeth had been just about to pierce his neck when Locke managed to shove the other alpha away forcefully, not before his claws had dug into his flank and opened a large and incredibly ugly wound in Locke's fur. Coupled with that which had already been sustained on the wolf's body, Landon felt themselves grow dizzy as he saw their own deep red blood slowly pool on the grass beneath. His vision began to blur as Locke staggered a little before collapsing onto the ground heavily. Locke howled in agony before shifting back into Landon, the alpha gritting his teeth and trying to get up despite the pain searing through his back. Bastion approached him again, lips bared in a snarl. Breathing heavily as he sent Locke struggling to accelerate their healing process, Landon used his hands to steady his body. He saw the shadow opposite morph as Bastion similarly shifted back into Bradley, who sounded smug. Still believe that having that Omega as your mate makes you strong? The man taunted, driving his foot down onto Landon's head, the latter hissing as his face was nearly slammed directly into the ground if he hadn't turned his head slightly. No, Bradley leaned down slightly, sneering at the other alpha. You may be young, but you are driven by your frivolous emotions and weakness. You don't deserve to be an alpha at all. Mandon panted, feeling the searing agony and despair in his body as his heartbeat echoed loudly in his ears. Without looking up, he knew that Bradley was shifting back, preparing to end him without mercy. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Beatty Elijah's voice sounded through the mind, Link, and Landon knew his friend was watching the action with concern and panic. His eyes threatened to sink closed, the exhaustion seeping into his skin, but then the last words he had shared with Aowen before leaving the pack echoed in his mind. I love you, Aowen. Come home to me, and I'll say it back. Suddenly Landon saw his life flash before his eyes. He saw his childhood, learning to swim in the nearby risen playing soccer with Elijah, happy, blissful and unaware of the responsibilities that lay ahead them both in the future. The memorial service that the Moon River Pack held for those who had passed during the rogue attacks. The then Alpha Wendell walking through the burial site with a grim and guilt-ridden expression as Luna Holly sniffled on his shoulder. Beginning his training under his father as the next Alpha in line. He saw his 13th birthday, the day he was suddenly overwhelmed with voices as the mind, ink open to him, sense overwhelming his nose and Locke introducing himself in his mind as his first. Painful shift was completed. He saw how Locke went mad the dusk of his 18th birthday, following that sweet scent before they found Rianne sitting beneath a tree, the sun setting over the Moon River Pack. Landon saw how they'd marked one another beneath the stars, before the rejection pains awoke him excruciatingly several months afterwards. That final note from his former made the only thing left of her. He saw himself spiral before being built back up with the help of his family and friends, and the night he met Aowen at the function, and then again at the edge of Moon River Pack territory. and then it began to flash forwards. And so Aowen in at an altar of a small church, affirming their vows to one another. Aowen was dressed in a stunning white dress, and Landon's breath caught in his throat as he saw the swollen belly his mate was proudly showing. He wasn't doing this. It changed again to Aowen lying in one of the pack hospital beds, cradling a beautiful boy with his dirty blonde hair and her grey irises. She looked tired, but her eyes were filled with happy tears as she gazed at her son. Their son. Landon felt tears sting his eyes as well, reminded more strongly as to why he needed to win this challenge. For the Moon River Pack, and for Aowen, his beautiful Luna, his perfect mate. For their future together. The visions appeared to have revitalized Lark as well, and pushing back all the pain, Landon shifted back into his wolf and drowned into Bastion, knocking him to the grass instead. Holding down the other's struggling limbs and avoiding his snapping jaws, Lark bit deep into a section of Bastion's neck, not immediately fatal but causing blood to seep onto the surrounding fur. Bastion howled and tried to throw Lark off him, but Landon channeled both their strength into keeping the larger alpha pinned and keeping their bigger wounds from bleeding out further. Lark's jaw ate, and in Bastion's for despite the metallic taste of the red stain in his teeth. After what seemed like forever, Bastion slowly slumped to the ground, shifting back into a bloodied and bruised Delph of Bradley. Releasing his grip, Lark arose, his yellow eyes boring into Bradley's as his chest rose and fell beneath him. Despite being weakened, the older man stared up at Lark and spat out a pain-filled chuckle as he held up his hands in an almost mocking signal, as if taunting Landon to finish him off despite his surrender. "You don't have what it takes to kill me." Lark looked down at Alpha Bradley sternly before he emitted a loud howl of victory and changed back into Alpha Andon. "No, because he'd be worse off dead. At least." He took a step back as the doctor came forward to inspect and treat Bradley's more serious wounds, Beatty Elijah cuffing the older man with silver to prevent him from healing or shifting on his own. Beta Richard followed him meekly, not daring to meet his Alpha's eyes. "I declare Alpha and Cartwright of the Moon River Pack the leader of the challenge," the doctor said after the necessary treatment was done. Landon bowed in return as the man signed a document that certified him as a witness to the challenge outcome. "We shall bring you back to the Moon River Pack, where you will be held for the time being." Landon spoke, looking down at Bradley as he glared back up at him, looking rather pathetic in his current state. "But once the dust settles, you will be taken to the court of the Alpha King." Aowen had genuinely improved in her fighting since coming to the Moon River Pack. She was quick on her feet, able to utilize more of her strength, and sense her opponent's next moves with more clarity to prepare her own. Even with all that, as Opal and Ars still airing at Ars's body fort, his increased speed and strength gave him an unfair advantage that allowed him to gradually further isolate and overpower Opal, despite her dragging at the fight. Eventually, as the sounds of Moon River Pack warriors and rogues battling each other faded into the background, Aaron shifted back and pinned Aowen forcefully against a tree. His gaze as it landed on Alpha Andon's mark on her was nothing short of livid. "Get your hands off me," Aowen bit out, struggling against Hacksmate's hold. "I will not go back with you. I'll make you come back with me," Aaron growled, and to her horror, his fangs began to protrude from his mouth. If he marked her, not only did it risk getting rid of her current mark, but it would send a torrent of pain to her current mate, and she didn't wish to inflict any further suffering on Alpha Andon. Not just because of the challenge or her love for him, but also because the man had already been through enough. Aaron's eyes burned with desire, jealousy, anger and mania. "You are still my mate. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Leaning his jaws closer to her neck. As Aowen tried to lower her head, he yanked it back by her hair and caused her to emit an angry hiss. I will make you my Luna. The woman felt tears sting her eyes as he got closer and closer, her throat being held firmly in place. But then Aowen's eyes abruptly flashed orange, and he was jerked back from her as if by some invisible pull. Aowen gasped, moving back as Aowen collapsed to his knees in disbelief, visibly straining as his irises began to change color. Green to orange, orange to green. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Aowen groaned, biting out a grunt of pain. His voice came out more gruff, more outraged as awe spoke through him. Do you really think taking that substance was enough to truly get rid of my agency as your wolf? He snarled, that I would let you forcibly mark our former mate. You should be happy that I'm getting our mate BA now. Oz roared, and Aowen's hands dug into his scalp, the claws almost coming out as the two struggled for control. Aowen moved away further, preparing to shift back into Opal and run back to help her packmates. She could hear Kale calling out warnings and alerts to the others, rogues dropping quickly but with many still standing. Some warriors had retreated briefly to where Dr. Enzo was to have their healing processes accelerated amid the fighting. But then a familiar blow zipped out of the sea of rogues, knocking right into the conflicted Aowen and bringing a rock down on the side of his head. The man crumpled to the floor immediately, alive but out cold. Aowen straightened up, her lips pressing together tensely as the woman stood up and smirked at her. From bracelet she wore around her wrist to disguise her scent, it was all clear. The rogues had probably heard of the challenge once news of its spread, and the woman had no doubt caught wind of it after her exile. Kylie. Watching the disgraced former Luna, Eve Aowen slumped against the tree and moved towards her. Luna Aowen. Kylie spat in return, making the disgust obvious in the way she spoke her title. Even now, after all that had happened, Aowen still couldn't believe this was the same woman who'd she'd comforted countless times a year ago. This was the real her. You brought the rogues here, didn't you? Aowen questioned, standing her ground. What do you want? To my agent extraordinaire, mythical Lone, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Kylie snorted and rolled her eyes, not even glancing at her former chosen mate. Him please. He's been pining for you endlessly and rejected me because of it. I'm not subjecting myself to that humiliation again. No. I beg your pardon, for the position of Luna of the Moon River Pack. Kylie looked very confident about this, and it was then that Aowen saw the new mark on her neck. It definitely wasn't Heron's. The rogues were helping Kylie because she had promised them a place in her supposed new pack. Who's the lucky mate? Aowen asked, letting the sarcasm seep into her voice as her heart pounded. He's strong and capable. That's all you need to concern yourself with. Kylie flicked her hand dismissively and stepped towards her again. Once you are gone, he'll finish off your pathetic mate. Without the both of you, whoever is left of your pack will either have to do my bidding or be left for dead. Just like you were. Aowen could not describe the way her blood was boiling. Of course she wasn't rid of Kylie. She should have realized it all along that a she, wolf like her, even after earning the ire of almost all the other alphas and lunas, being rejected by her chosen mate and banished from the pack of her birth the way Aowen had been at first because of her, would not give up until her rival lay dead at her hands. Opal growled within her, ready to emerge and tear Kylie to shreds. Knowing that the she-wolf was still expecting an answer, Aowen raised her head and met Kylie's gaze. I Luna Aowen of the Moon River Pack. Accept your challenge, Miss Kylie Paxton. The video ends here, but the story goes on. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.